Now, as we reach the end of the season, it is important to talk about the F1 cars and sort of where they all shook out in the end. This is sort of going to be an explanation of why Mercedes is a bit faster than the rest. It's also going to explain why the Red Bull and Ferrari are difficult for Alex Albon at the Red Bull and very difficult for Sebastian Vettel at the Ferrari. And will the Aston Martin be easier for Vettel? That'll be another thing I cover. So let's get right into this end of season technical analysis. Now, starting out, a lot of people wonder, why are Mercedes a lot faster than everybody else? Now, there are a couple simple things that put them ahead. As many believe, which isn't true at the moment, aerodynamics is not one of them. Their car understeers through the corners, and they're not very good at the super high-speed corners, which Red Bull are quite good at. The Red Bull, you can generally just chuck through the corners. It's pretty great. I've driven the car in F1 2020, and the difference in the way you have to drive the cars is profound. The Mercedes, you have to get on the power in such a way that you run wide at every single corner, whereas the Red Bull, you can keep your line very tight. But again, it's very interesting because according to Lewis Hamilton, and he says he likes to keep his racing line very tight, in theory, he would go faster in the Red Bull. So I think that would be very interesting to see if you swapped places, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, who would come out on top? Lewis in a car that's suited more to him, or Max in a car that is, in theory, overall faster. Now, one of the things that does put them ahead is their chassis. In general, they've had pretty strong underfloor downforce, but not overall aero supremacy against Red Bull, which Red Bull has had over Mercedes. And another thing to note is their engine. A lot of people just put their entire dominance down to the engine. It isn't. And a lot of their missed opportunities this season have not actually been aerodynamic related, they've been tire related. So their engine is quite strong and their aerodynamics are good enough. And in the end, you put that combination together, you get a car that's very strong. And that's sort of what they've done these last few years. They've put together this car that is in general strong, and in sometimes the engine is better than the aero, or the aero is better than the engine. Sometimes certain parts of the car outperform other parts. But in the end, it creates a very strong car, and they always set the pace at the beginning of each season because they have, since 2014, been the championship winners. They've sort of been able to set the benchmark. And a lot of people have copied Mercedes things that have either been red herrings for their types of cars, or they just haven't worked, and Mercedes themselves went down the wrong way. Very important thing to remember about Mercedes is their wheelbase is longer, which suits itself to some types of... They have to run less aerodynamic rake, which means their engine can be optimized, just giving them more straight line performance than Red Bull. Whereas Red Bull has a shorter car and they have more extreme rake, which is harder for Honda engineers to engineer that engine. But then again, the Red Bull car is more easy to get down to the weight limit because it's shorter. And this is the sort of thing that Adrian Newey is good at, getting a car down to the weight limit every single time and having extremely good aerodynamics. And even if the engine doesn't always hold up, he can always design a car that's aerodynamically excellent. And that is what Red Bull has done these last few years, even though they don't really get the recognition for it, which is too bad in my opinion. Now, the Honda engine is seemingly a very difficult one to control, as Alex Albon has had some spins and some crashes throughout the season, which certainly takes away from the possible points haul that Red Bull could have had, and probably their end-of-season constructors' tally of points. It is too bad. I'm not saying Honda has created a bad engine. In theory, they haven't. And, the fact is the engine is not outperforming the aerodynamics. The aerodynamics are severely outperforming the engine. The fact is Honda is behind on the whole engine thing. They've had one less year to develop their engines since the beginning of the turbo hybrid era, and that has just sort of plagued them. And they haven't really been able to overturn that deficit. It's too bad, but then again, you know what? The fact is their car is quite good on the aero, and it's not a bad car. Although certain people will lead you to think it is a bad car, it really isn't. So when talking about Formula One with friends or family, you should mention that the Red Bull is not a bad car. It is slowed down by its engine. Now, the Racing Point / Tracing Point, which some people have dubbed it. I just love that nickname. It's so unbelievable. People are so harsh. Anyways, The Racing Point, that is a car that copied Mercedes' 2019 aerodynamic philosophy. It struggled at some points early in the season, and it's struggling right now, but it has had sparks of brilliance, at times being faster than the Red Bull, generally because of its engine-chassis combination. So, it's an interesting thing for them. I think overall the McLaren chassis is better, and once they get the Mercedes engine, they will be supreme next year, and they will be considerably faster than Racing Point. Now, this is my sort of estimations for where everything will be next year. I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not willing to say this is going to be definitive, but, we'll see. Now, Sebastian Vettel is struggling with a Ferrari that has enough downforce at certain tracks, but a lot of drag, so it's hampered by that, as well as the fact that it doesn't have its stupidly fast engine from last year, which was illegal. Now, the issue is, without that engine, they can't run their high downforce, high drag setups that Sebastian Vettel loves with their very, very solid rear wing setup. That is the sort of thing that Sebastian Vettel strives in, and he won his championships in the Red Bull days with cars like that. It's important to remember that that is just how his driving style sort of works. Anyways, moving on, I think another thing to just talk about is next year, right? Vettel will be in the Aston Martin. I think this will, if Aston Martin allows him to choose how the car is set up and have the higher downforce rear wing, I think that he will strive, and I think he will conclusively destroy Lance Stroll. Now, that may seem harsh, but Lance Stroll, in the end, is a pay driver. He would not have gotten to Formula One without backing from his father, who, for those who don't know, is Canadian billionaire Lawrence Stroll. Again, may seem harsh, but I really don't think he's a good driver, right? But he's going to come up against a four-time world champion. That is something that he's just never come up against. He's come up against Sergio Perez, who's a very good driver, but Sergio Perez is not a four-time world champion, and I'm worried for his reputation next year. Moving on to some of the slower cars, you've got the Alfa Romeos, the Haas's, that sort of thing, and the Williams. The Williams, for instance, is 2 seconds faster than it was last year. They're making proper progression with the Williams camp. And as a Williams fan, I know, crazy, a Williams fan, I think they're making excellent strides towards becoming a bottom midfield or mid-midfield team. That will be excellent, and hopefully next year they can actually take the step to becoming a true midfield team and score some more points. That'll be excellent for them. Now, moving on to Alfa Romeo, I've made the joke throughout this season that they have a car that has the aerodynamics of a brick and the engine from a Ferrari, meaning that their engine is about as useful as an anchor, which is pretty much true. The fact that Kimi Räikkönen has dragged that car to points positions shows the value of Kimi Räikkönen. If anybody ever doubts Kimi Räikkönen, you can show them the 2020 season and show them his excellence in the Alfa Romeo. And in general, this season alone pretty much shows how much of a put-together driver he is. He knows what he's doing, and he can squeeze absolutely everything out of a difficult car, a slow car, and a car that does not deserve to be in the points positions. Now, for 2021, there are going to be some aerodynamic changes, with the floor being cut back and losing some downforce. It looks like they're going to be about 0.3 a lap slower at the beginning of next season than the end of this season. So we'll see. Probably by the end of the year, they'll be about as fast as they are right now, but they shouldn't be too much faster at all next year. That is something important to remember, that the cars over the winter shouldn't be getting much faster at all, and they should be losing time in the early parts of the season. Now, I quickly want to talk about why this is happening. The Pirellis apparently cannot handle the extreme pressures, and we've done a full rundown of this in our podcast, Technically F1. You should listen to that. That is a pretty good podcast, I have to say. Excuse me, that is not a pretty good podcast. That is an excellent podcast. Rate it 5 stars and only 5 stars. But back to the tires, there have been many failures detailed in the podcast, and I think it's just something that can't be ignored. And again, apparently the FIA think it can't be ignored either, so they're removing downforce from the cars. If you ask me, that's not the right course of action. In the podcast, we describe what should be done, which, in our opinions, they should allow as many tire manufacturers as possible, including Bridgestone and Michelin, who are the tire manufacturers that have had considered to be the best run in F1, the most reliable tires, and the ones with the least failures. And although Michelin will be remembered for the 2005 US Grand Prix, where there was a bunch of tire failures there, I think it's harsh, and they shouldn't be remembered for that, because they had many years of excellent service to F1 with very strong and very, very, very good tires. Although really nobody remembers that, they just remember the 2005 US Grand Prix. What a shame. If I had to rank who I think will be the top 3 teams next year, I think Mercedes will be the fastest, with Red Bull about a tenth of a second slower. 1.5 tenths of a second slower than Red Bull will be McLaren as the third place team. And I think the fourth place team will be firmly Ferrari. With their engine upgrades, I think they will be able to rebound to fourth place. They're a team that, they work very hard, and I think they will be able to recover from the slump that they're in now. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. We will be making more excellent content just like this. If you haven't enjoyed this video, explain to us why you haven't, and if you can't, you're just wrong. We will be making more videos like this in the future. However, our next video will probably be about the second Bahrain Grand Prix of the season, so we hope you will enjoy that as well. Thank you, goodbye.